Hello and welcome to my first tutorial on GameMaker Studio 2 drag and drop. For those experienced users, please bear with me because this is meant for the absolute beginner. Although this is my first tutorial on YouTube, I'm not new to teaching this subject as I've been doing it in schools. To begin with, drag and drop is not what you call no coding because it is some sort of coding, but you're doing it in a visual way. This is the manual for GameMaker. Under scripting, you have these two items. Alright. What it says here is drag and drop is a visual scripting tool. So you will still be doing scripting, but you'll be doing it visually. Alright. So you have all these icons here, which you can just drag over into your work area and make your game. We are going to start off with something simple. It's called click ball. It's a very simple game. Two objects are required, a wall and a ball. The ball bounces in a room which is surrounded by a wall. So what you're going to do is you click on new and you choose drag and drop. The Save As window appears. Type in the name of your game. And save it. It will automatically create the necessary folders and you will be presented with this empty space here with a panel here. This is called a resource panel. In the resource panel is listed all the resources that we'll be using in the game. And you notice that some are filled arrows and some are empty arrows. Empty arrows means there's nothing in there. Filled arrows means there's something in there. We don't bother with these two parts because it's more to do with the system, underlying system. But if we look at rooms, you have something here. This is created by default. A room is created by default. And if I try to run it, see the output here. It gives you a window, which is an empty room, and that's fine. Now what happens if I deleted that room and run it? Immediately it tells you fail. So that shows that you need a room, at least one room to run a game. Otherwise you'll get errors. And we had that in the past in the schools where the students created all these items here and they forgot a room and it failed. So let's create a room. This is how you create a room. And you notice that when you create a room, you get a room editor panel popping up over here. It comes with three main items: layers, instance properties, and properties room. Properties room is where you get the width and the height of the room, which is the default shown here. We will change the width and height here. So type in 640 by 640. And you can see the room change. The height, make sure you enter. Place your cursor somewhere around here. Click on your mouse, press your mouse wheel down or your middle button down and drag to reposition the room. You can see it in full. But if we can't see it in full, maybe something like that, you can always play with your zoom buttons over here. Alright, now it's black in color. We are going to change the color of this. Before we do that, let's have a look at the layers menu. Now in here there are two layers, instances and background. Background is referring to what's at the back, and instances is where you will place instances of your object. We'll come to that later. Let's look at background. Click on background and notice the icons are different, and you can have more of it by selecting here. Now click on background and you will have to click on this as well. Now notice it says background properties. If I were to click on instance, it says instant properties. So this is a changing pane or changing panel. So we go to background and we can click on the color bar here to give you a color palette, and you just choose a color, for example yellow, okay, and your background changes to color. Alright, we'll go back to black. You can play around with that later on your own. The next thing I want to show you is you can always put in another background if you want to. Alright, you can rename it. Okay, double click on it as normal renaming of any files. Okay, and you notice that it says background 1 here, and here also it says background 1 properties. So drop this menu down and you've got the color here to change. Now there are other properties here. We will get to that in another tutorial. But this is when you want to do tiling work with your background or whatever. You can even do background animation, for example falling rain, snowing, and so forth. But we'll come to that later. Now that we've got this room up to the specifications, let's get rid of this first. We will now start to do sprites and objects. Now, before we go there, you can just get rid of this panel and change to your workspace. These tabs here allow you to create more workspaces. Notice that when you are on the tab for the room, alright, the name will appear here as shown here, corresponding names. When you click on it, it automatically brings your room editor. But when you go back to a normal workspace, it does not go off. You have to get rid of it. You can also get rid of all this here by just clicking on this button over here, collapse, and everything is gone off. So next is the sprite. We don't have any sprites, and we're going to make them. The first thing is right click on your sprite, click create, and you get this new window here that is what you call your sprite window. You can name your sprite here, and you must always name them. Don't give it a name like sprite 0 up to sprite 100 and you don't know which sprite goes where. And here you will see it's empty, and on top here there is a little crosshair. This is what we call the origin of the sprite. You can change it around by just dragging, clicking anywhere, and it follows your mouse cursor. Most times it will be on that corner as a default. You can change it by clicking over here. For example, middle center, it will be directly middle center. Of course, now you can't see the whole sprite. Play with the zoom buttons. Create a sprite by using an image editor which comes inside Game Maker, and it's a fantastic image editor. All you have to do is click image, click this button here, edit image, and it will bring you to the editor, which will be on another tab. Now before we get there, I want you to notice that the width and height of your sprite is defaulted to 64 pixels. We are not going to use 64 pixels, we are going to use 32 pixels. So you click on this button and it gives you a resizing window. See, resize property. So here it says scale, and here it says resize canvas. We will choose resize canvas, and you can just key in your number 32 by 32. And make sure you are in pixels mode. You've got percentage and pixels, always stick to pixels, alright? Apply. And you see it has reduced in size. Now you can click on the edit image button, and it opens up a new tab here with your editor. So the first thing we're going to do is we make a wall. Again, you see the controls here are all the same. Now, there's something here called a grid. Okay? We will use a smaller grid, for example 1 by 1. And we can change the grid line colors as shown here. You can choose one. I'll choose red, for example, or maybe even white. All right. And just click away from the grid, or you can just click here. This is to switch on and switch off your grid. This is too big. I'll make it a little bit smaller so I can see better and get my grid on. So here we have two colors. This is for your left mouse button, and this is for your right mouse button. Now if you click somewhere here with your left mouse button, you get that. And if you click somewhere here with your right mouse button, the color will change. So you have two colors at your disposal using the left and right mouse button. So I'm going to go back to white. And black. Alright, I want to paint walls. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose it's already chosen by default, the paintbrush. I'm going to use my right mouse button and paint the wall outline, and I'll paint. Just go up there, hold my shift button down, and I use the wrong color. I'm supposed to be right clicking. So shift button down and I just drag it across. Now can I drag it elsewhere? It's not going to work. It's going to go across. Now I release my shift button, press my shift button and right mouse button down. Okay, it gives you a straight line. So you won't have something like that. Okay, so use a shift button for straight lines, vertically or horizontally. That's the outline. I don't need the grid anymore. I can fill this in now. Maybe I like a green color, for example, a nice little green. Okay, that'll do. So there is a paint bucket somewhere here. This one, click on it and fill it. Okay, wrong button again. I should have clicked with the right button. Okay, so the wall sprite is done. I can leave this, just switch it off, go back to my workspace, and here it is. I'm going to rename it to S wall. Next, we are going to make the ball sprite. Now when we click on create, it's going to give us the same old 64 by 64 and so forth. But we want to make a ball that is 32 by 32 pixels. So here's a shortcut. I will duplicate this and I'll give it a name. Rename it right SBALL, and I'm going to modify this sprite. Now notice if you scroll up, you'll see the original here, and this is the new one, which is the ball, but it's not showing you a ball. So I'll go to edit image, and guess what? I'm going to delete this. Okay, I'll just erase the whole thing. Erase tool, right? Get a big paint and just erase the whole thing, just like that. And go back to your paintbrush. So to get a ball, I will first go to the ellipse tool on this section, because the bottom part is a filled ellipse, the top part is an empty ellipse, that is an outline only. I want a black outline. Of course, I'll go back to the smallest brush and I'll put it in the extreme corner, top left hand corner, and drag it down to the bottom right hand corner so that the whole thing is filled with a nice ball shape. So I'll click on the right mouse button to get a black outline right down to this corner. I don't even have to look at it, and I know it's there. And I fill it up with a nice color. I'll click on a red maybe. Okay, get a fill tool and just fill it up. Next, I might want to give it a little shine on this ball to make it a bit more realistic. So what I'll do is I'll click in here and change it to something lighter. Now that would mean saturation. I'll go down a little lighter, and OK. Click the fill tool here, and maybe a little circle over here. And click on this again and go a little lighter on the saturation. Okay, and another little I think that should be okay. If we were to go back to the workspace and look at the ball, it's not too bad, is it? Alright, so we have a ball and we have a wall now. We can close this. Workspace 1 and open this up, and we have our two sprites here. Next, we will make the object for these two sprites. Now, on this workspace, we have these two sprites. So now let's go into the actual size. We will do the objects on another workspace. Okay, there's nothing here, it's empty. It's one thing good about workspaces. And I'm going to do the same thing, that is right click on the object folder, create, and now you get the object windows. Now you notice something here. It gives you the name. Alright, I'm going to make a wall, so I'm going to name it O wall. Notice sprites I use S and objects I use O. Makes my life easier. And for the sprite, I'm going to choose the wall. So now you're making an object. You're giving it some sort of visibility by assigning a sprite to it. Now it's possible that you have no sprites for your object. That means your object will be invisible, and there are cases where you will be using invisible object to actually control a game. It sits in a corner somewhere quietly in a room, monitoring and controlling the game. But in this case, we are not going to do that, maybe in a later tutorial. So back to wall. Now you notice a little window here, it says events. Now GameMaker works on events and actions. Whenever there's an event, there'll be a follow-up action. A good example is you and your alarm clock. When your alarm clock goes off, that's the event. The action will be you will wake up. Any other action is up to you, but you will wake up. Okay, so there is an event, there's an action. So there's a lot of events in GameMaker, and you can get it through this button here, Add Events. And it gives you a whole list of events. We'll go through them slowly, and there are sub-lists and so forth. So what we are interested in for this particular wall is no events, because the wall is going to sit there looking pretty. But there's something that we have to do for the wall, and that is make it solid. because when the ball bounces on the wall, we want the ball to touch the wall and move away from the wall. So we're going to keep it solid, we're going to keep it visible. That's about it for the wall. We are going to prepare the room with the wall. Alright, so double click on your room. Now, if you can't double click, you just select it and press the enter key. There is a reason sometimes why you can't double click or double clicking don't work, because there's a setting in the preference which I will show at a later point in time. But right now, let's go to the room, and you're familiar with all this. Let's decrease the size a bit. Okay. Now there's a grid here again. Let's have a look at the grid size, 32 by 32. Perfect. That is what we need. And we are going to line up this room with the wall. Now, if I'm in my background with background selected, and if I try to put a object in, you see there's a red X. You can't do that. Okay, it's trying to say you can't do that. You have to be in your instance layer to get an object in. Now I'm not going to drag. You see I get a green tick mark there which says it's okay, but I'm not going to do that either. Okay, what we have is a problem. We centered the sprite for the wall, and it's not going to sit flat. So what we can do is go back to the sprite, or go back to workspace 1, check out your sprite. Okay, now this is on the fly. You can do things on the fly, and bring your origin right up to the corner there. So it says 0, 0. Now let's go back to workspace 2, and go back to room. Now when we move this over here, it's going to sit squarely on the grid. Can you see that? Now this is how the origin works. If it was in the center, then it wouldn't be sitting inside the grid, but the center of the object will be at the crosshair of the grids. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a simple way of drawing the walls here, or tiling the walls on the perimeter of this room. Making sure you're in the correct layer, press your Alt key down. With the correct object selected, press your Alt key, and you can see the object appears. Left click on it to paint your object. Still holding your left mouse key down until you have finished to the very end. Okay, that's about it. So what you have done is you have walled this room. Now we are ready to move on to creating the ball object. Now the ball object will have actions and events. I would like to show you a little something here. File, Preferences, Sprite Editor. You see the default width and height is 64, 64. So if you want to change it to 32 in your future projects, just change the value here. And the default origin, if you had noticed, it was in the top left. You can always choose one of these, most probably middle center. It all depends in your game. What kind of game are you making? Alright, so do accordingly. So let's create a new object. And you see the object window opens for a new object. I'll call it O ball, and I'll give it the ball sprite. Very simple. There's an event here. The first thing we want to do when a ball is created is we want to move it on its own. So when you place the ball in the room, it's called a creation event. And every event there is something called create. Okay, we can get rid of this for more space and do your necessary adjustments as I'm doing right now. Okay, I'm going to just drag this over. Using the middle button, just drag over. I don't want to see this. I prefer to see the events and the action. This is the action window. Now when you create an event, a tab opens up here corresponding to this. So if I were to add another event here, let's say something simple, destroy, a destroy tab will open up corresponding. So I don't need this, so I'll just delete the events. In the create event, I want it to move. So I'm going to look for the movement group, which is here. Movement requires direction and speed, right? If you do not have direction and speed and you try to move, even us as human beings, you got no direction, you got no speed, or either one of these components, you're not going to move anywhere. So let's be fair to this ball and give it a direction. Now there are two directions here, set direction variable and set direction fixed. And there's another one here, there's another few here, alright? So let's try this one, set direction fixed. Now here, you can only choose one of these. It's a fixed direction. But we want all directions. So what are we going to do? We can just get rid of this. Set direction random. Now here you can choose all directions, and when during the game start, the ball will move in any one of these directions that you select now. Now you got a direction, you need a speed. So this is the icon for speed. Set a speed. Now type. Your speed is going in which direction? So you got a few directions, horizontal, vertical, direction. So you are going to follow the direction created here. So leave it as direction and give it a speed of 4. It's all here. Later we'll come back here because there will be some other problems. The next thing we're going to do is collision with the wall. So there's the collision here, and when you select collision, it's going to give you another list of all the objects that you have created. So in this case, it's obviously the wall. So the ball collide with the wall. The ball is the main player here, and the wall is what you call the other player. So when the ball collides with the wall, you want the ball to bounce or to move away from the wall. So what we're going to do here is, again, use the movement here to change the direction. Now this point, we will say set direction variable. Okay. So we're going to set the value of this direction. Now the word direction is a variable or reference that is used by game maker to store the direction in degrees. So the direction will be the existing direction plus something else. I would use, let's say, 60 degrees, but don't use exact values. You can use like 59, 61 because, you're trying to reflect the imperfection of a wall. So now what we can do is we go to the room get the ball in, alternate, and just click and put the ball somewhere there and run it and see what happens. The ball moves, hits the wall and moves in a certain direction. Now we are going to add some random values to make it move in a very random manner. We're going to increase the speed. Alright, so this is rather slow because we are running at 30 frames per second, which is the game maker standard or default. I'm going to close this, just click on the X here. Let's go to options main. Now this is the default value of frames per second. Can you please change this to 60 and click on the apply button and OK. So now if I were to play a game, it's going to move a little faster or double the speed. Now we will make the game interesting by allowing the player to click on the ball with the mouse button. To do that, you add an event for the mouse. Now you have three: left, down, left pressed, left release. There are three states for the mouse button, that is when you are pressing it down, when you are holding it down, and when you have released it. We will use the left down. Now what you want here to appear is some sort of a score. So you will increase the score, let's say, by 1 point per click. So there is a scoring system in Game Maker. You just have to scroll down to instance variables. Yeah, and it says set score. You've got get score, get lives, and so forth, health and as well. So we are more interested in the score, so we just drag it over here and we say add 1 point to the existing score, and it has to be relative because you are going to increase it with every click. So with every click you increase by 1 point. To make the game more interesting, when you click on the ball, you would want the ball to change position, to jump to another point in the room. So that means movement. So we go to the movement cluster or group. Here, and we find the jump to a point. We drag it over here and we say jump to a point. But which point is it? We know that the room has got a width and a height. So anywhere in that room from 0 to 640. So to a point X, we got to randomize this point. So we use the random function, and it's like this, random. Immediately the helper appears here. That's a good part about this game maker, and tells you to use the number X. So what you do is, within parentheses is going to be the room width. That's for the X, which is along the horizontal. 640. I'm going to use a number here. Normally you will use a variable, but for this first tutorial we're going to go simple. Now the same thing will be for your vertical, which is your y-axis. I'm going to use random 640 because the height is 640, the room height is 640. I'm going to increase the speed of the ball by a little to make the game more interesting. So let's go to speed which is here, and we add something to it. Now when you add on to the existing speed or any variable, you will be using relative. So I'm going to add on a fractional value, that's 0.01. Now we will draw the score on the screen. So we'll go to add event to find for the draw event, and we have it here. We will be using draw GUI for this first tutorial. Find the draw group here. Many things to be drawn, and draw score will be here. So you drag it over here, and you will find the caption for score here. Whatever word you use in here, it must be within quotes. Alright, and then you put the X and Y position. So Y position will be higher up the screen, maybe let's say about 50, and the X position will be somewhere in the center, which is half of 640, which is 320. But since we want to offset it a bit, so it should be around 290. Okay, so now we try that. Okay, we have a score, says 0. We will click on it with the left mouse button, and you get a score of 1, and the ball changes position. Score of 2, score of 3, and it changes position. Alright, so that works. Now one thing that you might be thinking of is the direction will change with every collision with the wall. What happens, and it keeps adding up. What happens when the direction is more than 360 degrees? Will it just keep increasing and increasing to an infinite number? The answer is no, because internally, whenever it hits 360, GameMaker will reset it to 0. To demonstrate that to you, we will draw the direction value. Alright, in this case, we will say draw a value, okay, and the value will be the variable, which is direction, and the caption we can change it to direction, just so that it looks nice and we know what we are talking about. Alright, the position will be 290. We will follow the same figures and add another 50 to this, maybe, or 40, 90. Alright. Now we play it. Direction is there. You notice it will never go above 360. So we have come to the end of this tutorial, and the next one will be afterthoughts about this, where you will learn some finer points, and I'll see you then.